Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, ala alihi wa sahbihi wa wala. We said, first question we'll ask ourselves, did we cross the threshold, the longest duration of haid or not? If we did not cross the threshold, everything is haid within the time of haid. We cross the threshold, then we'll go back and ask ourselves, can we tell different types of blood apart? And if we are, then the thicker and the darker will be haid, and the lighter and the thinner will be istihada, or apparent bleeding or purity. And then if we are unable to discern, we'll ask ourselves, do we have an established habit? And if we have an established habit, we'll use that as our reference point. And then everything else beyond that established habit, the 5 days that we used to get at the beginning of the month, every month, and so on, will be considered istihada. And if we don't have either one or two, or A or B, then we will go by the average woman. The average woman will have istihada 6 days out of the month. So we'll have to hide 6 days out of the month, and the rest of our bleeding, we will consider it to be istihada, which means what? We're pure, but we're making wudu for every salah. We're keeping ourselves from sweating, and we're making wudu for every salah. And other types of discharge, pregnancy spotting. Can you have haid in your pregnancy? Well, it's controversial. And medically, actually, medicine does not solve the problem either. Medicine does not solve the problem either. But Hanafis and Hanbalis say, no, you cannot have haid when you're pregnant. Malikis and Shafi'is will say, yes, you can have haid. You could actually have some haid when you're pregnant. And you could have threatening abortion, which doesn't materialize. You could have, Anyway. What is easier for you is to say what? You cannot have haid when you're pregnant. Because it creates a lot of confusion to say that you can have haid when you're pregnant, because of conflict of rulings. Postnatal bleeding. Postnatal bleeding is nifas. When does nifas begin? What is nifas? What is postnatal bleeding? It is bleeding that happens upon childbirth and because of it. Bleeding that happens upon childbirth or because of it. Why do we say or because of it? Because Hanbalis will consider the bleeding that happens 1 or 2 or even 3 days prior to childbirth, will consider it postnatal bleeding. If there are indications that you are in labor, which is a very merciful position, because if you start to have any spotting and you have labor pains, Hanbalis will tell you you don't need to pray anymore because you are in nifas already. Because this is bleeding that is occurring because of childbirth. Not just upon, but because of. So 1 or 2 or 3 days. And it can last up to 40 days or 60 days. 40 according to the majority, 60 according to the Shafi'is. Actually, it can last up to 60 days. Medically speaking, it can last more than 40 days. So the Shafi'i position may be stronger here. It can last up to 60 days. When do people become, when does menopause hit? All these numbers will be fine, by the way. Because, the different mazhab will have different, even within the Hanbali mazhab, you have 3 different positions. 50 is the final, they settled on 50, but the middle generations of Hanbalis were using 60. And some people threw 55 in, in the mix of that. Anyway, eventually the oldest woman to give birth to a child was a Spanish woman who gave birth to a child at age 67. So it varies, but we say something in fiqh. Fiqh is about categorization. Fiqh is not about, biological diversity. Fiqh is about categorization. So in fiqh, we can use 60. We can use just 60. It will be, we can use 55 or 60 because la ibrata bin nadir. Rare things don't have, are inconsequential to rulings. Rare occurrences are inconsequential, or rare cases are inconsequential to rulings. Anyway, so postnatal bleeding can happen like 1 or 2 or 3 days prior to labor if accompanied by labor pains, and last up to 60 days after childbirth. Brownish yellow.
Should we say all rulings identical to Hayd except for duration?
Yes, so all rulings of nifas are identical to Hayd, but certainly, there are some differences. Some of them are madhabi, so, and, I'm not going to sort of get into them. If nifas returns, if nifas stops, if bleeding stops and comes back within that period of 40 or 60 days, what is that? They will say it is nifas mashkuk fi, it is doubtful nifas, treated as nifas, or treated as postnatal bleeding. But in the Hanbali madhab, it is basically, it takes the rulings, complicated rulings. You have to do everything, and you have to make up for everything because it's doubtful. But one thing, there are some differences between Hayd and nifas. One of them is certainly the duration. One of them is the cause. One of them is the fact that bulugh or puberty is not marked by nifas; it's marked by Hayd, because if you have nifas, then you have reached bulugh prior to this, of course, because you were pregnant, and that is a marker of bulugh. And also, nifas is not considered in counting the waiting period. Nifas is not considered in counting the waiting period. And if someone makes ila of his wife, someone basically refrains from having marital relations with his wife, and we will start, to count the 4 months against them. Nifas will not be included in this count. Nifas will not be included in this count. Anyway, brownish yellow, we discussed this. Vaginal moisture, we discussed this, and we said it's inconsequential. If it is clearish or whitish, inconsequential. If it is brownish or yellowish, then if it is connected to Hayd, it is Hayd. If it is not connected to Hayd, it's inconsequential. And that brings us to the end of this. And Aisha radiallahu anha, we started with this hadith, but Aisha radiallahu anha said how excellent are the Ansari women. They do not allow shyness to prevent them from understanding their religion. قولوا قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك اشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك. And then next will be the Q&A.